It is the essence of Italy. Its name is a reference to Jupiter, the god of the sky and chief deity of Rome, and good Sangiovese can taste heavenly. But it only really performs at the highest level at home. The heart of the Sangiovese production beats in Tuscany, one of the most beautiful parts of Italy, and I decided to dive deep into a wine region that has dedicated itself to producing wines with this noble variety. The wine is called Vino Nobile di Montepulciano. Andiamo. To get this out of the way right away, Vino Nobile di Montepulciano translates to the noble wine from the town of Montepulciano. It has nothing to do with wines made from the grape variety Montepulciano in places like, for example, Abruzzo. So if you want to get to the source of Vino Nobile, you have to come to the old town of Montepulciano, which is located in Tuscany, roughly 100 kilometers south of Florence. Montepulciano's history goes back to the 4th century BC. It is a tourist attraction today with many wine shops, restaurants and scenic views, and you can just go there and sit on a stone bench after a long day of tasting wine. I just missed the Bravio delle Botti, a festival that includes a race of people pushing wine barrels uphill to the main square. That's really something that can only take place somewhere where there is a deep-rooted wine culture. Vino Nobile became one of Italy's most famous wines in 1685 when Renaissance poet Francesco Redi called it the king of all wines in his poem Bacco in Toscana, which is kind of like Jay-Z rapping about his favorite champagne brand today. I first came into contact with Vino Nobile when I was a student in Florence. I went to a shop to buy a bottle of wine, or as I called it in my broken Italian, una buona bottiglia di vino rosso, and I left the shop with a bottle of Avignonesi's Rosso di Montepulciano, effectively the second wine of the estate. I was fascinated by the freshness and liveliness of the wine that combined ripe cherry fruit flavors with black tea notes and an intense structure. Rosso di Montepulciano represents the entry level at most estates. It's usually a fresh and fruit-driven wine made for immediate consumption, and it is usually really good value, giving you a good introduction into the region. That is not to say that the real Vino Nobile is expensive. I would argue it's one of the cheapest classic wine styles from Italy, while the prices for wines from the north and from other neighboring regions in Tuscany have gone up significantly. The prices for Vino Nobile have stayed fairly stable over the years. Vino Nobile has to contain at least 70% of Sangiovese, which is also called Prugnolo Gentile in the region. Growers can blend in other red and white grape varieties, but the trend is more towards using high levels of Sangiovese of up to 100% in order to produce a more pure expression of that grape variety in that region. I was invited to come to the region by Alliance Vinum, a group of some of the best producers of Vino Nobile, and they've set out to produce pure expressions of Sangiovese from some of the best sites in the region. So 16 years after my first contact with Vino Nobile, it was time for me to travel there, revive my memories and find out what makes this place special. I came to the region during harvest, which is a magical time. The excitement about the incoming grapes was palpable at every winery I visited, and I got to witness all the joy without having to go through the back-breaking labor and sleepless nights that the winemakers have to deal with. My first stop was La Braccesca. The winery belongs to the famous Antinori family, and it covers 500 hectares of land, of which 340 hectares are planted to vines. The Antinori family is from Tuscany, and they own many high-end wineries in Italy and abroad. They acquired La Braccesca in 1990, and they've built an impressive wine cellar at the estate. First we went into the vineyards though, where a team of harvest workers picked the ripe Sangiovese grapes and brought them back into the winery. The smell of the grapes, the juice and the fermenting wine was delicious, but not quite as delicious as tasting the finished wine in the tasting room overlooking the estate. Sara Pontremolesi, the enologist at the estate, talked to me about Vino Nobile and also shared her frustration about people confusing Vino Nobile with Montepulciano d'Abruzzo.
They can understand that when you find Nobile di Montepulciano is in Tuscany and is nothing with Montepulciano d'Abruzzo, but is a special appellation in Tuscany.
Sara also makes wine at the other Antinori estates and therefore has a pretty good overview over the different regions growing Sangiovese. She thinks that Vino Nobile tends to be more structured, but therefore also more age-worthy. She also believes that it is important to focus on pure Sangiovese in order to bring out the typicity and style of Vino Nobile.
We really think that for having an identity in variety like Sangiovese, you must be 100% Sangiovese. And I'm quite sure that in Montepulciano we have the instruments to do this.
At Salcheto, I was introduced to the owner, Michele Manelli, who showed me around the estate while explaining his exciting approach to winemaking to me. Salco in the ancient Tuscan language was the name of a willow tree whose branches were used to tie the vines, and the tree features prominently on the label of the estate. Salcheto is also the name of a stream that runs through Montepulciano, and as you can see from the name alone, there's quite a lot of importance given to nature here at the estate. Michele goes through long lengths to reduce the impact of the winery on the environment.
Finding the way to use all the wastes of pruning to create energy, geothermal fields under the vineyards and the parking lot to create again some cool energy systems, but also of course some photovoltaic. I mean, a lot of solution to integrate it in a single project to achieve this self-sufficiency.
The winery is underground, but they don't use electricity to light it. Instead, they've developed light wells that funnel the light underground into the cellars. They also use lightweight bottles, which is, in my opinion, an easy win in order to reduce carbon emissions and costs without impacting the wine's quality. Michele is a firm believer in producing pure Sangiovese, and he actually let me in on a secret of his.
When I started winemaking in Montepulciano, I was illegal because I was 100% Sangiovese, and it became legal only in 98.
In the past, Vino Nobile, like other traditional red wines from Tuscany, relied heavily on blending in other grape varieties in order to ensure consistent qualities. Today, this safety net is not as important anymore as Sangiovese ripens more reliably and can produce outstanding wines without blending in other grapes. At Salcheto, they practice polyculture, growing vegetables in their gardens and raising geese that they can then sell at their restaurant Indigeno. There's no better way to experience the beauty of agriculture than to eat a beautiful meal paired with great wines, knowing that everything on the table came from the same place. Even though some might find it a bit dark to eat perfectly prepared goose dishes while hearing the gaggle of the geese honking in the vicinity. The next day I visited Boscarelli, and the story of this smaller winery started in 1962, and the estate was built by Paola and Ippolito de Ferrari. Ippolito died early in an accident and Paola took over the business. No easy task for a single mother of two in the 80s, but Paola persevered and built one of the most impressive wineries in the region. Today, Luca and Nicolo run the estate and we walked the vineyards together, witnessing the harvest. Everything was a little bit smaller and more artisanal here, and Nicolo even told me that he built some of the wooden structures at the winery. Luca took me to their famous Il Noggio vineyard, where we talked about the differences in terroir between Vino Nobile and other growing regions in Tuscany.
The ripening of the tannins is really slow, are not burned from the sun, and are really stable. If you taste a Vino Nobile with 30-40 years, you have a more live color compared other wines from the Tuscany.
I was invited for lunch at their house, and what could be better than to eat at home in Italy, especially when the hosts reached deep into their cellar in order to bring out some older vintages. They kindly opened the 2004, 2001 and 91 vintages of their Vino Nobile di Montepulciano Riserva for me, and the 91 still showed really well. It was turning garnet towards the rim, and it definitely showed signs of aging, but it kept it together, while 2001 and 2004 were still beautiful. We talked about winemaking and they spent a lot of time on the blend. Especially Luca works meticulously when deciding on the final wine.
That I never convinced about the wine, so I organized the blending, the tasting blind. It takes 6 months to decide the final blend of a wine.
Their wines are balanced and rich and show more polished tannins. Niccolò describes them as pure.
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 It's
Okay.
pure.
Yeah.
Is we try to express what we have. We don't force to have a different thing that the one that our land could produce.
They believe the region needs a clearer identity to make them more understandable for the general public.
The character of this wine that has a long history in the past, was really famous in the ancient, in the century, is the energy of the wine, of the grape of this area.
We need to share an idea of Vino Nobile. It has to be full, rich and dark, or back, perhaps some years back, thinking perhaps Vino Nobile, the standard Vino Nobile has to be lighter, more approachable, easier, long potential of aging, but a wine that you drink easily. And then we have reservas, special selection, Pievi, Cruise, all the rest.
The wineries are visited were all family businesses, and as everywhere, it is important to hand over the passion for Vino Nobile to the next generation, and that is clearly the case at Poliziano. Poliziano was founded in 1961 by Dino Carletti, who planted the first vineyards. In Italian, a person from the town of Montepulciano is called a Poliziano, and the most famous Poliziano was Agnolo Ambrogini, who was a scholar and poet during the Florentine Renaissance, and his face is today on the logo of Poliziano. Federico Carletti took over the winery in the 1970s and grew it to 170 hectares of vineyards, but now his children are taking over. It was great to hear the plans of Maria Stella and Francesco for the winery and the region as a whole. They've spent time abroad and soaked up ideas and concepts that they are planning to put into practice at home.
I went to Australia
All right. Okay.
this year, actually, in
All
February.
right. Okay.
Yeah.
So in the beginning of the
Yeah. It's my second 2023 vintage.
They're looking at breaking up the vineyards in order to understand their terroir better, and they have identified their Avignone vineyard as the one with the highest quality. The wine is therefore bottled separately. Part of their approach is also to focus on 100% pure Sangiovese wines, as they explained in the conversation.
And I think that brings us to the Alliance, the new project of the Consorzio, and this will of producers from Montepulciano to focus specifically more on the vineyard, on the location, and the 100% Sangiovese. To find a location which was capable of making 100% Sangiovese
It's hard.
in a very expressive manner was tremendously difficult.
They see the opportunity to build on their father's work in order to take Vino Nobile to the next level.
Since we have this amazing tradition, this amazing history, this amazing terroir, and all these years of experience now, we can claim that we are capable of producing 100% Sangiovese wines that are really, great quality and something very unique in the world.
They also described the difference between Vino Nobile and Brunello as follows.
We live a little bit souther than Chianti Classico, and we're not as close as they are to the mountains which cross Italy. So our climate is generally a little bit warmer than theirs, and that has an impact on the quality of the Sangiovese. Our climate tends to be a little bit more continental.
We do have a more austere and crunchy, I like to say crunchy for Vino Nobile. I think it describes it really well, which is very different from, the acidity-driven, dry Chianti Classico and, the warmer and more aged Brunello.
I often ask winemakers what they drink apart from their own wines, as I think it's quite important to see what's going on in the rest of the world. And I found it really nice to hear that they like to drink wines from all over the place in order to further their education and discuss the wine.
No, we're drinking a bit of everything right now.
Yeah.
We've started not many years ago, so we're still learning a lot. So we're planning trips around. We're going to Piedmont in a month or so, and we're trying everything really right now. We're experimenting. That's for sure.
The first Vino Nobile I tasted years ago during my time in Florence was from Avignonesi, so it made a lot of sense that the last stop of my trip through Montepulciano was at the estate where it all started. The Avignonesi estate is historic with expansive cellars and several buildings for winemaking, aging and tourism. They even have a chapel with a stone statue inside that scared the bejesus out of me. The famed estate does not rest on its laurels, especially since Virginie Saveris took over as an owner. They've banned the use of synthetic biocides in the winery and the vineyards, have stopped the use of commercial yeast, have lowered greenhouse gas emissions and bottle weight, while focusing on indigenous grape varieties and producing elegant and expressive wines at the estate. This is quite a challenge for any winery, but especially for a large operation like Avignonesi, cultivating 175 hectares of vineyards. In the cellar they use many different types and formats of vessels, including concrete eggs, amphoras, wooden barrels and stainless steel. I spent my day with enologist Matteo Giustiani and agronomist Alessio Gorini. During a vertical tasting of their top wine Poggetto di Sopra, it became clear to me that their use of oak has changed away from smoky notes to more fruit-driven, precise wines.
Sangiovese is very delicate, especially in that area because we don't have a lot of color. And if you're gonna use small barrels, sometimes you're gonna smell just which is the tonnery where you purchase the barrels.
And Matteo shared some real gems talking about the beauty of tasting wines through vintages.
I love the wine because with wine you can, it's like a library. So you can taste different vintages, and you have it's like a photo book. You can see, oh, I remember I was in 16 or 17.
On the question of what the future of Vino Nobile is, Matteo also had a really good answer.
We are lucky enough because we have an amazing soil and amazing climate. Because you cannot change the soil, you cannot change the climate.
Well, we tried to.
We tried, but it's not a good direction, I would say. The future of Nobile di Montepulciano is just people, because we have everything settled. We have a story, we have an amazing town, we have an amazing soil, we have an amazing climate that I hope so is going to be resilient with the global warming. So it's just a matter to don't stay in the comfort zone, but move on the challenge.
Together with viticulture expert Alessio, we had a closer look at the vineyard and discussed the topic of Prugnolo Gentile and on how much clonal selection impacts the quality of the final wine.
Prugnolo Gentile is is the local way of calling the Sangiovese. The Sangiovese profile, it's much more impacted to the place where it grows, the climate, the microclimate, rather than the clones.
Even though I have to add that Niccolo from Boscarelli actually believes that the clonal material has quite a big impact on the quality and style of Sangiovese.
The feeling we have is that Sangiovese is so big, the family, that it depends a lot by the selection of clone you have. Mm-hmm. Because we know that from the massa selection we have used to replant a good percentage of the vineyard, then the new clone we had experimented for some vineyard as completely different results.
There are also differences in opinion when it comes to the best soil type for the production of Vino Nobile, but for Alessio the answer was pretty clear.
I would say that the clay, even though may bring a little bit of this chalkiness in the tannins, it's fundamental for growing a great Sangiovese. At least for this area.
But if the clay is too dense, it becomes difficult for the vines.
This clay, it's almost blue, and it's a limit for the vines to grow. You can see, if you dig a hole into the vineyard, you can see the roots that from time to time that tend to get in, but as those clays cracks, there's a lot of dead roots into this clay.
Avignonesi also prepares their own compost, which is a great way of bringing vitality back into the soils.
A lot of life into the soil. It brings humus. It's something that helps the soil to structure, and as well it has a huge impact then on the nutrients available, the capacity of the water to the holding water capacity of the soil, so the capacity of the water of the soil to retain moisture, which is something more and more important nowadays, and as well avoiding the erosion, because as much as I can improve the structure of the soil, the less I have erosions on the soil.
That makes a lot of sense, and it's a great way to help the nature, but still, he was rubbing manure between his hands. At first I couldn't quite get over the fact, and then I obviously had to touch the stuff myself. Anyways, I learned a lot during my time in Montepulciano and rediscovered the excitement that I felt when I first tasted a wine from the region. There were many outstanding moments during my trip, but the best was sitting together with all of the winemakers, eating the food that they had prepared beforehand, including the famous peachy pasta, and sharing a few bottles of Vino Nobile over dinner. There's definitely a lot of potential for the noble wine to raise to former glory, especially if the people behind the wine continue to share their love for Vino Nobile. If you ever get the chance to try some, you definitely should. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, then please like it down here. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. My question of the day is, have you ever tasted Vino Nobile? Did you like it or not? Let me know down below in the comments. I hope I see you guys again very soon. Until then, stay thirsty.